September 27th, 2016, a young man named Kim Chang-yo decides to escape North Korea. But there's one problem. He has to cross one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Between him and freedom is a 2.5-mile wide strip of land that separates North Korea from South Korea. It's the Demilitarized Zone, the most heavily armed border in the world, filled with mines from the Korean War. It's covered with barbed wire and it's monitored by thousands of soldiers. Kim was a soldier in the North Korean army. He was stationed at a guard post on the border. And as a soldier, he had a rifle, he had a uniform, he had a job. But he also had something else internally, a drive to be free. Every day, Kim stood at his post and looked south. He could see South Korea in the distance. He could see the free world. And every day, he thought about what it would be like to live there. What would it be like to make his own choices? What would it be like not to be controlled by the regime? Then, one day, he made a decision. He was going to escape. He was going to cross the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone. He was going to risk his life for freedom. But Kim knew that if he just ran, he would be shot. The guards would see him. The soldiers would open fire. He'd be dead before he would make it 10 meters. So he had to be smart. He had to be careful. He had to plan. On the morning of his escape, Kim went to work like any other day. He put on his uniform, he picked up his rifle, and he went to his post. And then he waited. He waited for the right moment. Then, when the guard wasn't looking, Kim made his move. He started walking away from the post. He tried to act casual. He tried to act like he was just doing his job. He held his breath. He waited for someone to stop him. He waited for someone to ask him, where is he going? But no one stopped him. The guard looked away just at the right moment and Kim kept walking. Once he was out of sight of the post, he started running. He ran deep into the valley. He ran into the woods. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him. Behind him, he could hear shouts. He could hear soldiers calling out. He could hear the sound of the pursuit. But he kept running for hours. He wandered through the woods. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't have a map. He didn't have a plan. All he knew was he had to keep moving south. He had to keep moving towards freedom. The terrain was brutal. The forest was dense, the ground uneven. He cut himself on trees and branches. His uniform was torn, his hands bleeding. And then he almost died. He was running through the darkness when he didn't see a cliff edge. He stepped off the cliff edge and fell. He tumbled down a rocky slope, and as he was falling, he thought he was going to die. He thought this was it, this was the end. But he didn't. He survived. He landed, and when he landed, it was hard. His body was bruised, bones aching. He realized he was still alive. And at that moment, something changed inside Kim. He'd never been religious. He'd never believed in God. But at that moment, he lay on the ground at the bottom of the cliff and prayed. For the first time in his life, he prayed for God's mercy. And then he got up and he kept moving. Kim continued through the night. He crossed streams, he climbed hills, navigated through minefields, straying the paths. He navigated through minefields by staying on paths that he could see had been walked on before. He avoided areas that could be mined. He moved slowly and carefully. And then, finally, as the sun was rising, he saw it. South Korea. He'd made it. He'd crossed the DMZ. He'd escaped. And when Kim reached South Korea, he was arrested. Not by the regime, but by the South Korean authorities. They had to verify that he was a real defector and not a spy. They had to interrogate him. They had to make sure that he was telling the truth. But eventually, they believed him, and Kim was released. He was free. Today, Kim Yang-yo is a student in Seoul. He's studying political science. He's living a normal life, and he's experiencing freedom. For our next stories, we go from land to sea, as we look at two different but daring escapes via the sea. Now, imagine being a father. Imagine having a pregnant wife. Imagine having your mother depending on you. Imagine having your brother's entire family counting on you. Imagine carrying an urn containing your father's ashes. And imagine deciding that you're going to take all of them across the sea to freedom. This is the story of a man that we'll call Mr. Kim. He lived in North Korea with his family. Like every other man with a family, he had a job, he had a home, he had a life. But he also had a dream of freedom. Mr. Kim knew that escape was almost impossible. He knew that the borders were sealed. He knew that surveillance was constant. He knew that if he was caught, his entire family would be punished. But he also knew that staying meant a lifetime of oppression. It meant watching his children grow in a prison. It meant never being able to choose his own future. So Mr. Kim began to plan. First, he needed access to the water. He needed a boat. He needed to know where the guards would be distracted. He needed to understand the patrol patterns. So his strategy was that he would start befriending the coast guards and security guards who patrolled the area. He would talk to them, listen to them. He would ask them casual questions about work, their schedules, their routines. And slowly, piece by piece, day by day, Mr. Kim gathered the information he needed. He learned when the guards changed shifts. He learned which areas were less heavily monitored. He learned the blind spots in the surveillance system. Then he enrolled his brother in a fishing scheme. The scheme was designed to catch fish that would be sold to pay for military equipment. It was a way for civilians to contribute towards the regime, but Mr. Kim saw it as an opportunity. It was a way to get access to boats. It was a way to get his family to the water. On the night of the escape, Mr. Kim gathered his family, his pregnant wife, his mother, his brother's family, and the urn containing his father's ashes. He wanted his father to be part of the escape. He wanted his father to reach freedom, even if only in spirit. They made their way to the coast under the cover of darkness. They got into a small fishing boat, and Mr. Kim made a decision that would define the entire escape. He decided to leave during a storm. Most people would think this would be madness. A storm meant rough seas, a storm meant danger, a storm meant that the boat could capsize. But Mr. Kim understood something that others didn't. A storm meant that the surveillance ships would retreat. A storm meant that the patrol boats would stay in port. A storm meant that the guards would be distracted. So Mr. Kim started the engine and he drove the boat directly into the storm. The waves were enormous. The wind was fierce. The boat was tossed around like a toy. Mr. Kim's pregnant wife was terrified. His mother was praying. His brother's family was holding on for their lives. But Mr. Kim kept the boat moving forwards. They had to navigate through a minefield. A minefield! The waters off the coast of North Korea are filled with mines left over from the Korean War. Mines that could destroy the boat in an instant. Mines that could kill everyone on the boat. But Mr. Kim had studied the maps. He'd learned the safe passages. He knew where the mines were and where they weren't. The boat moved through the minefield. Every moment felt like an eternity. Every wave felt like it could trigger an explosion. But the boat kept moving. And then finally, they were through. They'd navigated the minefield. They'd survived the storm. They were in South Korean waters. When Mr. Kim and his family reached South Korea, they were the first people to have successfully escaped by sea that year. They were the first sea defectors of 2024. And they had done something that experts said was impossible. They had escaped with an entire extended family. They'd escaped with a pregnant woman and they'd escaped with an elderly mother. Mr. Kim later told an interviewer it was like the heavens helped us. And when you hear the details of his escape, it's hard to disagree. The timing had to be perfect. The weather had to be good. The guards had to be distracted and the family had to be brave. Everything had to go exactly right, and it did. Today, Mr. Kim's family is safe in South Korea. His wife gave birth to a healthy child. His mother is living in freedom. His brother's family is rebuilding their lives. Our third story is about a young girl who was born in Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. Her name is Jory Kang. But when Jory was just a child, everything changed. Her family was exiled to Pyongyang to a rural fishing village. The reason? Her grandmother's religious beliefs. In North Korea, religion is forbidden. Belief in anything other than the regime is considered a crime against the state. So Jory's entire family was punished for her grandmother's faith. Growing up in a fishing village, Jory began to see the world differently. She saw poverty, hunger, she saw control. And like any other young girl, she began to dream of something more. And one day, she got a glimpse of the outside world. Foreign media information beyond the borders. For the first time in her life, Jory realized that there was another way to live. There was a world beyond North Korea. She made a decision that would change her life forever. She decided to escape. But Jory wasn't going to run blindly into the night. She wasn't going to hope for the best. She was going to plan and calculate. She was going to do something that almost no one had ever done before. For months, Jory worked in secret. She saved money, she gathered information, she studied maps, she learned about tides and the currents, she studied the patrol schedules, the guard boats. She identified the blind spots in the coastal guard posts. She was preparing for something that had never been attempted in modern times, a sea escape from North Korea. Then she made contact with smugglers in China. She bought a GPS device, a smuggled GPS device that could guide her across the water. She checked the condition of a small fishing boat. She prepared food and supplies. She trained her body for the physical demands of the ocean. She trained her mind for the terror of being caught. And then she told her mother and her aunt about the plan. Now, this was the moment of truth. This was the moment when everything could fall apart. If her mother and aunt refused to go along with the plan, it was over. If they told anyone, Jory would be arrested. But her mother and aunt didn't. They believed in her. They trusted her. They gave her money for the boat. In 2023, on a night when the conditions were perfect, Jory, her mother and her aunt made their way to the coast. They got into a small fishing boat and they started the engine. They began to move toward the open water. The boat cut through the darkness. The waves were rough. The wind was cold. Her hands were shaking as she held the GPS device. She was terrified, but she was exhilarated. She was doing something that was supposed to be impossible. Behind them, North Korea. It was beginning to disappear into the darkness. Ahead of them, South Korea was waiting. Between them was the Yellow Sea. Between them was freedom. The boat moved throughout the night. Hours passed. The GPS guided them. The currents carried them. And then finally, they saw it. South Korean waters. They'd made it. They had crossed the sea. They had escaped. And when Jory and her family reached South Korea, they were welcomed as heroes. They were the first people to have successfully escaped North Korea by sea in years. They were the first sea defectors of 2023. And Jory, at just 22 years old, had orchestrated one of the most daring escapes in modern history. Today, she lives in South Korea free, and she tells her story to anyone who will listen. Now, these stories of courage and determination, stories of people who refused to accept the life that was chosen for them. According to human rights organizations, more than 33,000 North Koreans have defected to South Korea since 1998. But that number represents only a fraction of those who have tried. For every person who escapes, there are more who don't. For every successful story, there are countless of stories of tragedy and failure. The defectors you hear from today are the lucky ones. They're the ones who made it. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to like, comment and subscribe and tell us which story moved you the most.